Well, we've been here before, haven't we? Darren Ferguson and Peterborough United in League One once again. Fergie Jr. has delivered 8 promotion pushes in 9 seasons at this level with the Posh, and for that matter, got over the line a couple of times as well. New challenges this season. Last year they were doubted because there was a sense of a reduced budget, but the likes of Harrison Burrows, Kwame Poku, Ephron Mason-Clark all came to the fore and had outstanding individual campaigns, along with, of course, Ronnie Edwards. But there's going to be new challenges once again this season, because not only has Mason-Clark left for Coventry, as was agreed in January prior to him being loaned back, there's also the possibility that at least 2 of Ronnie Edwards, Harrison Burrows and Kwame Poku will depart London Road as well. So fresh challenges for Darren Ferguson to get to grips with, and how can he evolve this squad and replace possibly those key players, and can Peterborough stay in the promotion mix in what's a stronger league? Doubt them at your peril. That's what we're going to be discussing on this summer. Yes, well, yes, welcome along to the latest EFL Debate Summer Deep Dive, one of 72 we're doing across the EFL between mid-June and mid-July. Already the full Monty uploaded for League 2 to YouTube and Spotify, so go and subscribe once you're done with this one. For now, I'm delighted to be joined by Tim Stoodley from the Yellow Block podcast on Peterborough United. Tim, how do Peterborough United adapt to the fresh challenges that League One's going to bring, replace those key players and stay in contention this season?
Well, that's the big question, Gabs. If you can ply us with the answer, that would be perfect. It's that rinse and repeat every summer, isn't it, for, I suppose, all the League One teams that fancy themselves to go up the following season. I feel like it's a cut and paste, really, of every summer before for us a little bit. You're quite right in saying that it's a tougher league this year. I think that's a fair comment. And I do wonder if we will come to regret maybe not making that step up last season. But I mean, I feel like we say this every summer as well. For us, it's really about retention, I think, more than anything at the moment. I think most of the fan base are probably expecting to lose 1 or 2 big players. It's really around who we can keep out of those players. And I guess moreover, what our plan B is in terms of replacing them. It's been relatively quiet on the transfer front at Posh so far. And I'm hoping that tempts fate a little bit and kicks things in, certainly in terms of bringing players in. A couple of signings through the door, but really we're kind of just still in limbo about who's going to be going the other way, which I think is probably going to be most important for us.
Yeah, certainly is. Do you expect to lose 2 of Ronnie Edwards, Harrison Burrows and Kwame Poku, or do you think you might be able to get away with just losing the one of them?
Yeah, I don't think we'll lose Poku. I think if we were going to, we probably would have by now. I feel like him and Mason-Clark were kind of in the same boat, and most teams sort of looked at Mason-Clark over Poku. I don't think he's quite ready for that step up yet. Probably another season. So I feel like we'll keep Poku. Burrows, I think we're more likely to lose out of the 2 defenders with Burrows and Edwards. I have a funny feeling we're going to end up keeping Edwards for another season and then losing him on a free. If you are he's been linked with multiple Premiership clubs. If you are a Premiership team, it's not really in your interest to take him at the moment, give him another season development in League One, and then pick him up on a free. So I think we probably will keep Edwards. I'm hoping that we do sell him because he's a huge asset in terms of financially. So it'd be nice to be able to get something for him. But I feel like Burrows is probably the one that we're more likely to lose. He's been linked. It feels like he's been linked with every Championship team at some point in the last couple of weeks. So we'll have to wait and see. But I wouldn't be surprised if we do only lose the one, I guess, was a very long answer to the short question you asked.
No, we like long answers on this podcast. I suppose I normally start these podcasts, Tim, by asking about the manager and the owner, but I suppose Darren McAntony and Darren Ferguson are such familiar figures at Peterborough United that I almost feel like it would be repeating ourselves from last year if we spoke about those. But just touch on the work that both of them have been doing at Peterborough United.
Yeah, I mean, I guess starting with the manager, with Darren, he, I guess, embodies everything that is Posh. He's when most, I would imagine, most fans that don't support Posh think of the club, Darren Ferguson is probably a name that they associate with him now. I mean, the facts and figures you gave at the start there in terms of promotion pushes he's had versus the actual times he's succeeded. Do we have to start maybe questioning whether he is doing enough? Maybe. I don't feel like we're there yet. But potentially, if we do have a copy of last season in terms of not quite making it, maybe those questions will be asked. In terms of Darren McAntony, our chairman, I'm quite publicly vocal in my discontent, really, I suppose, around Darren and the way that he manages the club. And I know that there will be many fans from other clubs that look at that and wonder quite why. There's a lot of fans that love the fact he's outspoken. They love what he's done in terms of a transfer policy. So for me, it's really around the transfer policy that we've got works fantastically well in terms of bringing revenue into the club. Everybody knows that. There's so many success stories at the club. And I guess from my perspective, I wonder why we're not then able to take that next step up with the amount of money that's coming into the club from transfers. We have made an incredible amount of money from players over the last decade, way and above what most championship teams make. And whilst I fully accept that our fan base is smaller, I would question why we're in so much debt. I would question why we're unable to put money forward for some of the players that we need to sustain that next level. But that's very much a personal opinion of mine, one that I've been quite vocal of. The fan base as a whole is very much behind Darren. There are small sections that aren't overly appreciative, but generally as a fan base, we are behind Darren and Darren at the moment. So there's no reason for that to change. And I feel like this summer it's another big summer for the club. It always is, particularly when you're a selling club. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see what aces they've got up their sleeves.
Yeah. I think, the sort of, the fact that it was a reduced budget last season, I can see why that's sort of surprised some people. But I also think that I don't feel like the debt, maybe you can tell me more, but I don't feel like the debt is something to be overly concerned about. It doesn't seem to be something that has stopped the club from holding out for the big fees, because that's something that I think Peterborough can do really well, Tim, is you don't sell at the first offer and you do get the right fees for your best players, which can be really difficult for other clubs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel as though over the last few years, we've almost built up a reputation whereby simply playing for Peterborough United as a young, talented footballer almost adds value to any potential transfer fees. When you look at the players that have come through the system and have gone on to achieve, I could name many, but obviously Ivan Toney, we've got in the England squad now. Sammy Smodics absolutely tore up the championship last year. You've got this conveyor belt of players coming through, and we do make good money. And I guess the flip side to that is you then get fans like myself that question well, why are we not seeing that reinvested into the club? And ultimately, it's Darren's train set. He can play with it how he likes. If he wants to keep all of that money he makes, that's absolutely fine. Ultimately, it's his money. He's the one that's got to make sure everyone's paid at the end of the month. But you do start to wonder why then when we do take that step up into the championship, why we still go young and hungry, why we don't seem to have any money to outlay on transfers. And whilst our transfer policy works, it's fun, it's exciting, it doesn't work at the next level. And we found that a couple of times. And I guess that's where the frustration comes for me as a fan is
do you not think though, Tim, do you not think though that part of it is investing in the infrastructure and the quality and the number of staff that you employ as well, which has been quite a big thing? I know Grant McCann spoke about that when he first came in, that the backroom operation is a really big deal for him, and that's something that seems to have strengthened at Peterborough in the last couple of years as well. So do you not think that there's investing in areas that maybe aren't seen in the same way as, you know, a transfer that you can see visibly on the pitch? It's more obvious.
Yeah, I do, and it's a fair point. However, I don't think that comes from Darren. We recently had a couple of new co-owners join that relationship since turned sour and they've left. But when they came into the club, we saw huge investment in the youth academy, training facilities, etc. And that's brilliant, and that's the kind of stuff that you're alluding to, and I absolutely agree. But that isn't Darren. It was never Darren prior to the co-owners, and I don't imagine that sort of investment will continue now that those co-owners have left and it's back to just being Darren. So yes, it is a fair point, but when you look at our transfer revenue in, and again, this is just a personal opinion. It
Sure.
feels as though that maybe doesn't feed back onto the back into the playing squad. And I'm fully aware of the fact that we're not a huge club in terms of fan base, and I have to temper my expectations. And realistically, I've got no idea how much it costs to run a football club. I guess I just compare us to other models in terms of clubs of a similar size that have been able to take that step forward, or a couple of steps forward, without the transfer revenue that we've got coming in. So it's just, for me personally, I say the fan base as a whole is still very much pro Darrow, and I guess excited to kind of see what the summer has.
Yeah, for sure. So let's go to the squad then, Tim, because I want to start with the goalkeeping position. Bilo Kapic started about 2/3 of the games last season. He's under contract as well, as Will Blackmore, who's a young goalkeeper, only 22, made 4 appearances for the Posh. But Bilo Kapic, you can be happy with him as the number 1, or do you feel like you need another goalkeeper?
So a couple of weeks ago, we were able to get Jed Steer to re-sign, which is huge for the club. So Bilo Kapic will fall back to number 2. Jed Steer is massive for us. Technically a signing for the 3rd time because he was out of contract, but he will potentially be the biggest signing of the summer for us. And it's so weird as a Posh fan because it's not a position that we ever invested. And whilst I fully understand he was a free, he's not going to be cheap in terms of wages, that's for sure. So it's nice and it's refreshing to see that actually we are investing in that position. Normally what we do is we bring in a goalkeeper on loan, they have a sensational season, we fall in love with them, and then they go back to their parent club. So it's nice that actually we've got a goalkeeper that the fan base do love, and that gives us all for the club, that's actually ours, and is a player that we will we've got for the season now. That's not in question. So I feel like that was big. Being slightly older and more experienced as well, he's huge for the development of some of the younger players in front of him. So Jed Steer will be the number 1, a huge signing. Bilo Kapic will play second fiddle to him. I would expect him to play in the cup games, and then Will Blackmore, I mean, he's young. I would imagine he'll just continue to develop at the club.
That makes sense. James Dornley had a few games at right back last season because Peter Chioso's loan was terminated in January, wasn't it? Yeah, what did you make of James Dornley? And do you think it feels like it might be a bit soon to put too much expectation on him, but could sort of bubble away nicely?
Yeah, we've got a couple of young sort of wide defenders who look quite good. Dornley is certainly one of them. It is definitely the position that we still need to invest in heavily this summer. We had, well, I say we had, the fan base certainly had a lot of intention of trying to get Chioso back. As it is, he's gone back to, he's gone to Oxford, I should say, having been sold. So that's frustrating, but definitely right back and left back, if Burrows does go, are positions that we will need to invest in quite heavily, because they are at the moment well, there isn't anybody there that can play there realistically, certainly not at this level. So we will see players coming in that position. I say we will. We've had summers before where we've needed a left back and not got one, so who knows? But in terms of Dornley, great player, well, great potential, should we say, but not quite ready for consistent League One football.
Yeah, hopefully he can sort of continue to make a contribution to the squad. I guess centre-back again, the big conversation is around Ronnie Edwards. I mean, you mentioned there that you think it's not going to make sense for Premier League clubs to come in for him as opposed to get him when he's out of contract. But I just think there's the fee is, previously Darrow had held strong on its 8 figures. Obviously, you're not going to get 8 figures in the last year of his contract. So it's going to be a bit less than that, the price. But surely you'd be able to get a good 7-figure fee for a defender of his potential.
We'd certainly hope so. I do worry that we've maybe missed the boat a touch. There was a time when Ronnie Edwards was nicknamed New Stadium because he was going to fund our new stadium. I mean, there's no doubt, and I've said it to you before, I've said it consistently, and most Posh fans have said this, he is destined for the very top. He will... unless something goes really wrong between now and 5 years' time, he will be England's first choice centre back in a few years. I have very little doubt about that. And that's not me looking at it through bias. There's other players in League One that I feel have that kind of potential. But the way that Ronnie's developed and continued to develop, he walks into most Premiership clubs starting 11s now. It's just madness that he's playing League One football for a team like Peterborough. he's got a new. If he does stay at the club, he has a new test next season because we've lost Josh Knight, who was huge for Ronnie's development. Josh Knight is a player that I would have set up a GoFundMe to try and keep at the club. He was an incredible asset. He's gone off to Germany. So Ronnie's got a new test coming, but he's taken every test prior in his stride. I've no doubt if he does stay that he will continue to develop and continue to amaze everyone. He's a bit of a cheat code in defence at this level. I believe Ronnie Edwards in terms of the figure. Yeah, I mean, I said because he's still so young. I feel if you're a club that's watching him, surely you would just wait and then just offer him a contract in January.
But then there's so many clubs, so it's almost like you've got a chance of getting him when there's fewer clubs queuing up. Whereas you go for him when he's out of contract. Yes, you wouldn't have to pay a transfer fee outside a tribunal or whatever, but you're competing maybe with fewer suitors, perhaps.
Yeah. And that's fair. And I think, we probably will see offers. We've not really had there's not really been any rumours kicking about, which is unusual over the summer. There's normally a team or two that's been linked with him. We may see it. We've had the photos from the first day back at training, and he's very much there and smiling and back in the squad. So, yeah, who knows really with Ronnie Edwards. All I do know is that we've probably lost some of the value on him that we did have. Mm-hmm. Maybe we kept him a year or two longer than perhaps we should have done. But that's hindsight, isn't it? Of course, that's easy. And all the time he was playing so well, it's hard to put a price on that. But yeah, he's a special talent. He really is. And I do hope in some ways that we do sell him this summer, not just so that we get some money, but also Barnet deserves some money for developing him at a younger level. So, it would be a shame if he does go for free. And I know what you're saying about we still get that compensation, but yeah, if we can get a decent fee for him this summer, I would absolutely take it without question.
Yeah. So at the moment, in terms of centre backs, you've got Fernandez, you've got George Nevitt, who was signed from Rochdale. Some good reviews from him. Yeah. You've signed Samuel from West Brom, but these are all talented young defenders. So again, a little bit further back on the conveyor belt than Ronnie Edwards. So you're going to need some experience at the back this season, aren't you?
Yeah, and that's why Josh Knight was a huge loss for us. Emmanuel Fernandez is a great young prospect. He is ridiculously tall, strong, but despite that, he's pacey. Mm-hmm. His heading ability is incredible, and he will play at this level, if not higher. I've no doubt about that. And he's not that far away. Is he good enough to be starting centre back? Probably not, but he's pretty close. And maybe if we were forced into having to play him consistently, then he would get to that level. I don't know. Maybe Jensen Summel that you mentioned, we've got from West Brom. I mean, we've signed him technically for the under-21s. Again, I don't think he's quite there yet. I've watched a couple of his games since we signed him. Technique seems pretty good, and he seems to take up good positions. But again, I'm not quite sure he's quite there. George Nevitt, however, definitely signed for the first team. I would be surprised if he wasn't starting at the back on day one. I do think he's probably there and he's probably ready. He's what we like in terms of being that ball-playing defender. I wouldn't be surprised if he's been signed as Ronnie Edwards' replacement if and when Ronnie does go, because there's similarities there in terms of being that ball-playing defender. He's composed on the ball, good work rate, good header of the ball when he needs to be. So, yeah, I feel like he will start. It's whether or not it's him and Edwards or Nevitt and somebody else, but we'll absolutely need some reinforcements there as well, definitely.
Yeah, do you know what? It struck me listening to you talk about George Nevitt and how you're planning to accelerate his development, and how James Dornley's going to be part of the squad, even if we're not expecting him to start regularly. Mills, you could even throw at, in terms of the left back option, he's probably going to be similar position to Dornley. This sort of model that the club has, I think it can bring some incredible rewards, because when these players ascend simultaneously, you can all of a sudden have a squad with 8 figures worth of value. They're all sort of thriving simultaneously, and you can be really competitive at the top of the league. Yeah. But there's also this sort of, you've got to show faith in players in order to be able to get there. And sometimes that means showing faith in players when they might not necessarily be ready. It's like a kind of It's a what's the word? I'm looking for it. Catch-22, where you don't quite know what the perfect. It's almost impossible to have that perfect trajectory of results versus development. And that's kind of what I'm sort of a bit curious about with Posh this season, especially if a couple of the big hitters leave.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And this was how it was kind of sold to us last summer, which was this is a young squad, don't expect too much yet. And then what we saw, of course, was a great season where those players that we weren't quite sure if they were ready proved that they absolutely were ready. And some of them, have gone on to be linked with big clubs. And obviously the likes of Mason Clark, although there wasn't really any doubt whether he was ready, it was whether he could be consistently ready. And as it is, he's proved that he's more than ready for that step up. So yeah, Mills, you mentioned Mills. He's a player I really, really like. I'm really excited to see how he develops. He's not really had the game time outside of the cup. So I know he played against Cheltenham the back end of last season, but then we rotated so heavily that day that I almost got a game. But he looks good. He looks quite composed. I think once he gets used to the physicality at this level, I think he'll be quite good. I think if Burrows goes, I'm not sure he's quite ready yet to be the first choice left back, but he's not far away. I feel I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see more of him this season, particularly if Burrows does go.
Yeah, absolutely. So coming on to central midfield, then you've got the good news, I suppose, is that you've got Archie Collins and Hector Cipriani, and they're almost what I quite like about those two is that they've been consistent enough last season for you to feel like these are players you can rely on, but you can also rely on them in the sense that there's not Premier League clubs queuing up at the door for them, and in a way it's quite nice to have a couple of players in the squad that are sort of like that, where you're not sort of sweating over whether they're going to be there.
100%. 100%. And Archie Collins is the epitome of that. Even with the Posh fan base, he's that player that just turns up, does his job, doesn't get all the accolades. But without him, we are half the team that we are when he's in that starting 11. He is I know it's a cliche, but he's the engine room of that team, Archie Collins. Huge asset for us in terms of how we play. He allows us to play how Darren likes us to play. Massive signing for us. Really good. Cipriano as well. He has been linked with a move to a couple of championship teams, and I wouldn't be overly surprised if that doesn't come off this summer. Equally, I wouldn't be surprised if he is still here come game one. So if we can keep them two, that's great, because that gives you a real solid base to that midfield. But certainly Archie Collins is a player that's flying under everyone's radar, and I am more than happy about that, because all the time he's in a Posh shirt, he's pulling up trees. He's a great player. He's that kind of N'Golo Kante player that just kind of, every squad's got one. They don't get all the praise and all the accolades, but they're the player that you need in your squad if you're going to do well. And Cipriano's development has been sensational, so hopefully that can continue as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting actually, because when Archie Collins was at Exeter, he actually took on more of a creative role. So it's funny how at Peterborough he's been more of your reliable, keeps things ticking over at the base of midfield and sort of pulls the strings from maybe a deeper, more disciplined position. But you've got de Havilland in the midfield mix as well. Do you think he might be able to get some opportunities next season?
I don't think Fergie's a huge fan. He was put on the transfer list this summer. Whether or not that he'll go, I don't know. He's not. I mean, I quite like him personally. He's a good League One player. He's probably no better than that, I would say. But he's been relatively inconsistent, but ultimately he's had quite inconsistent runs in the team. He's only ever really made it in when either Collins or Cipriano have been injured or suspended. So he's a utility player. He's kind of one of those players you want in your team because he helps make up the numbers. He can do a bit of a job if he needs to. Whether or not he's happy fulfilling that role, I don't know. But he's okay, I guess. He's a good option from the bench, but he's probably no better than that personally for me.
Okay, so is there an opportunity for some of the for a couple of the other lads that you've brought through the academy? You've got O'Brien Brady's one who's come through the under-21s. Could he overtake de Havilland in terms of that midfield?
Possibly. We've not seen enough of him again, other than the Bristol Street Motors Trophy. We don't really see too much of the youngsters, which is an ironic thing to say, seeing as our average age was about 12 last season. But it's we've not seen enough of him really. I don't think he's quite ready for that step up to league football. De Havilland would take that over him. It's a position. It's difficult because it's two positions. How many good backup options do you need? We've got De Havilland. Do you need any more? I mean, it'd be nice to have perhaps another one, but do they get onto a bench? Are they happy to kind of just be a squad player? I don't know. It's a difficult one. It's probably not the position that we need to prioritise in terms of transfers in, assuming, of course, we keep hold of Collins and Cipriani.
Sure. Yeah, I think the way the club's going to operate, though, is it's going to have the first choice players as in the best 11, or maybe 15 sort of real senior players. But then it probably will give space to some of the under 21s talent to make a name for themselves, which is great if your best 11 stays largely fit. But then I do think that if, say, Archie Collins or Hector Cipriani or both were to get injured, especially simultaneously, I think that might give you some problems if it's not an area you're prioritising, which is understandable. Yeah. So we'll see. Oh, by the way, Charlie O'Connell's been transfer listed. I think that's just because he's entered the last year of his contract, is it?
Yeah, so transfer policy that we've got any player in the last year, we put on the transfer list to try and get some money from him. I mean, his development has probably not been rapid enough. I guess that's maybe why there's not been that offer of an extension with Charlie. A great lad, works really, really hard.
Yeah,
but
he did really well out on loan, though, didn't he? Not last season, maybe the year before. I think he did really well in the National League. So
yeah, and he's not made that step up. I guess that's what I mean. His development's maybe stagnated a little bit. So from a club's perspective, I would say he's getting on. He's not getting on, but from a youth perspective, he's probably getting towards the end of that point where you need to be in the first team or you've got to be moved on. I guess that's probably where we're at with Charlie at the moment.
That makes sense. So Kwame Poku, then you've mentioned at the top of the show, Tim, that you're quite confident that that Kwame you might be able to retain him. Do you see him starting on the right again this season, or is there a world where he actually gets moved into the middle and somebody like Jacob Wakeling comes in on the right?
Yeah. So it's the problem that we've got is our creative output comes from those wide areas, those attacking left and right mids, and that's why we saw Poku and Mason Clark do so well last season. And I noticed that the Sky Blue Hub's asking how big a loss EMC is to us. In answer to your question, huge. Good luck. Look after him. You've got an absolute bargain, I would say, in EMC there. Poku is great when he's allowed to express himself, run forwards. He turns players inside. He goes down the touchline. He's tricky. He's difficult. It's a defender's nightmare. I would personally keep him wide for that very reason. Ephraim Mason Clark was probably a better option in the middle. Poku is very much that wide player for me because he just creates. He's almost what England need at the minute. I'm not suggesting he's that level, but in terms of somebody that will go wide or come inside, that will just make life difficult for those wide defenders. So I think Poku will stay out that side. Obviously, we've brought in Chris Clark as well. Now he can play anywhere across that kind of attacking mid position. I suspect he will play wide left. And Poku will play wide right, and then we've got Abraham Odu as well that we've brought in this summer. So I feel he will probably play second fiddle to those two. So,
well, can I come in on Odu, Tim? Because one thing that's always stood out to me about him is that he can be really effective in short bursts. So I think when I've seen him play for Rochdale in the past, there's been this feeling that in the first 5 minutes of a game, he's an absolute live wire. But then sometimes he can kind of run out of. He's not able to sustain it so much, which is why I'd almost be quite excited to see what he could do initially as a sort of an impact sub or someone that you can kind of bring in, not bombard with too many games, because I think if you reduce the minutes, you get more of an impact from him. So that's what I'm quite excited to see with Odo and how he can make that adjustment.
And that's how I think he'll be utilised. I think Poku will be on the right, Con Clark on the left, Triple C, I need to start calling him because it's a mouthful otherwise. Con Clark on the left and then Randall in the middle. yeah, and Odu will be, I would imagine, that kind of impact sub that you talk about there. He feels like that kind of player. I know that Rochdale mentioned issues around consistency similar to what you were mentioning there. So, yeah, hopefully that's the kind of setup that we'll see across that front three.
Yeah, absolutely. Con Clark, another one, a bit like Nevet. That's it's a big jump for him from the National League to League One, but his numbers at Altrincham were very exciting, and I think from some of the highlights I've seen, I don't know if you've seen a few of them as well, Tim. He looks like he's got a bit of arrogance about his game, which I think sometimes a lot of the good posh players down the years sometimes need to have. So that could be exciting.
Yeah, I mean, he's everything that we need in that wide player, and he's, I wouldn't say a like for Mason Clark, because it remains to be seen if he can make that step up. But in terms of his dribbling abilities, technique, that agility that he seems to have, and the times that I've kind of watched him, what's impressed me the most is his anticipation. He seems to be a couple of steps ahead of those around him, and I think that's really, really important, and maybe something that perhaps we didn't see enough of from the likes of Poku and Mason Clark last season. I feel like the anticipation that he possesses could potentially be a huge asset for us. I know he's also quite handy with it from a dead ball situation, which will be quite nice, because that's definitely one of our weaker areas. And if Burrows does go, we'll also need a free kick taker. So hopefully Triple C can step up to that position as well. So I'm excited to see what he can do. He's probably, alongside Jed Sear, he's probably the one signing we've made this season or this summer, I should say, so far, that I'm most excited to see in terms of what he can bring to the club. I don't have any doubt he can make the step up. I think he's ready.
Sure, I think he can make the step up to League One as a. Can he be a League One player? And I do kind of think, though, making the step up for a side with promotion ambitions is a bit of an ask, and so I think you've got to give him a little bit of leeway initially. But the talent looks absolutely ridiculous. So hopefully he can light up London Road.
Well, hopefully he'll be the next Mason Clark, going out and making us a decent, tidy sum. I'm really interested to see what happens with Mason Clark. He's like, as a fan, you always want to see how your players get on. Players like Schmodix lighting up the Championship have been great. Really interested to see if Coventry could use Mason Clark in the way that he should be used, which is that kind of flair player out wide that's kind of just left to do his thing, really.
Yeah. Well, the player that sort of facilitated that, I guess, last season was Ricky Jade Jones, although Malik Mothersill did get a few starts towards the end of the campaign. Intriguing competition up there between those two, who give you different options.
We need a striker, Gab, if I'm honest. I know that Con Clark can play forward too. If we're going into the season with Mothersill and Ricky J. Jones as our striker options, we're probably going to be in trouble, if I'm completely honest. It was, ironically, for a Posh team, that lack of clinical striker that cost us last season. Now, we scored a load of goals, so it wasn't so much that we weren't creating opportunities. We ironically just weren't scoring enough of the opportunities that we were creating, which is, it almost feels selfish saying that when you look at how many goals we did score. But if we had a good striker, which you normally associate with Posh, we probably would have got automatics last season. Because for every goal that we scored, and we scored plenty, we created 3 or 4 wonderful opportunities. But we really lacked that kind of clinical finish. Now, Ricky J. Jones he's a player that obviously we've brought through the academy. Fans have a real affinity to him, but he is the most frustrating individual to try and watch play football, because you just want this lad to do well. You want him to do well because he's one of your own. We've given him so much investment and time and playing time, but he's just not there. And it's so frustrating because he is the fastest human that you will ever see run, but there's nothing else to his game at the moment. And originally he was playing wide left. Then we brought him into the middle last year. I think we're trying to find a place for him to fit, but it's just not happening. Mothersill, on the other hand, came to us in poor fitness, had issues with injuries. He is a player that I think, if he can get fit and stay fit, will be a really good asset. I think he's shown enough that he could become a really, really good attacking option for us. But Ricky J. Jones, for me at the moment, isn't quite there at the moment.
Tim, I do see where you're coming from, because from one angle, there is going to be a reduction in quality in the attacking midfield spots without Mason Clark, and therefore you could argue that you need a more of a clinical centre forward to sort of make up that gap.
Yeah.
However, I also feel Ricky J. Jones was a really important part of the way you played. I kind of disagree with you with the idea that pace was the only thing that he offered, because it's one thing having pace in short bursts, like we've spoken about with Abraham Ado, but Ricky J. Jones has the stamina to do it for 90 minutes, which I think is huge, because from a point of view of pressing against the opposition and giving yourselves territory higher up the pitch, that makes a massive difference to the volume of chances that you can create. Plus, I think he's shown a bit of strength at times to graft in those wide areas and hold the ball up at times for other players. And I think that'll only continue to develop. As he's only 21, isn't he? I also think there's a world where his finishing improves, and actually he's getting into the right positions. And maybe it only takes a couple of goals early in the season, and all of a sudden Ricky J. Jones can start to find his angles and starts to get a bit of confidence. So for me, I actually think Ricky J. Jones is closer than maybe we recognise from the outside. That's just my opinion from the outside. And I also think that there's probably a good chance that the club themselves would actually say, Ricky J. Jones and Malik Mothersill have done enough that we're going to prioritise our budget in other areas, because they're ahead of somebody like a Mills if Burrows goes, or a Dornley at right back, and we really want to prioritise those sort of fullback areas. So that's what I'm thinking the club might take.
I would, whatever you say about Ricky J. Jones, I would absolutely have agreed with you 3 or 4 years ago in terms of the potential he was shown within those areas. And there is legs in what you say around creating opportunities for others in terms of how difficult he makes life for defenders. And we did see that last season. But if you're going to play him in that advanced central position, and he does get into the right positions 9 times out of 10, he has to be able to finish, and he can't. His finishing is awful. And I guess second to that, his decision making is questionable. And I guess as a Posh fan that's watched him, I mean, you say he's only 21, 22, but it feels like he's been in and around the first team for about 20 years. So as a Posh fan, you kind of feel like he should be further ahead than he is by now, because when he came onto the scene, he was the next big thing. He was our next big sale. He was, going to be a huge asset for us.
But wasn't he was built up a bit unfairly though, Tim?
In terms of the age that he was put into,
a bit like for a 16-year-old that shows some promise, that's got searing pace, and all of a sudden people are projecting things onto Ricky J. Jones that maybe might have been a bit premature for the stage that he was at.
Potentially, but then at some point you have to say, we've given this lad everything we can. He has had more minutes, more game time as a young player who's averagely performing than any other player at the club that I can think of, certainly in the last decade or two. He's had more than enough time to develop. It's not a case of he's not getting game time, because he is. He's playing pretty much every game, and he's not developed at a rate that he's now falling behind where he needs to be at this level in terms of his projection for me. He's gone from being, this lad could go to the very top, to this lad could become a decent League One player, but that's probably about as far as he can go now, in my opinion, at least. He's fast. He's incredibly fast. That creates problems in itself. But you need more than that for me at this level. You need more than just being able to run really fast for 90 minutes. Because, that creates issues. And, it's great as an impact sub. But you definitely need more. And we're just not seeing that from him at the moment. So I don't think they will bring in another striker. I completely agree. I think it will be Ricky and Malik Mothersill that we go with. But from my perspective, we need somebody that's more clinical. Now, Malik is more clinical, so if he can stay fit, I think Malik Mothersill will be that first choice number 9. But ultimately, we're losing that. We've lost Johnson Clark-Harris, and whilst I understand he couldn't really get into the team over the last season, you're losing that ability to bring somebody on that will score you a goal. That's just what JCH did. We don't have that now, and I do worry that that's going to cost us. Not so much JCH specifically as a character, but just that person that can come on and find a goal out of nowhere, because we don't have that at the minute, and I worry that that's going to cost us.
I personally think the trade-off is preferable with Ricky J. Jones up top to with Johnson Clark-Harris up top, because I think that Johnson Clark-Harris would have finished a lot more chances than Ricky J. Jones last season. I completely agree with you. But I think you'd have you'd have created way fewer chances with Jonson Clarke-Harris than you have with Ricky J. Jones, because of Ricky J. Jones's movement and the way that he creates space for other players. Whereas I look at Jonson Clarke-Harris in games for 90 minutes, and he looks very languid. He only looks interested when the ball's actually near him. And for me, if you want to create a really balanced side over the course of a 90-minute game and 46 games on top of that, you need players that are constantly aggressive against the ball. So I do get that. I do get the big moments can be a bit of a hindrance. But I think that if you're the leading centre forward in a side that scored 92 goals, I think that suggests for me that Ricky J. Jones is doing a lot for the team. But I do get your point, and hopefully, you know, the ideal would be someone who could provide a similar work ethic to Jones, but is a bit more of a ruthless finisher.
I mean, is that too much to ask? Somebody that creates the opportunities that Ricky J. Jones does, but also can finish. I don't know. Is that selfish of me to ask for that? I don't know. Maybe, but I just feel like
is it a double-edged sword where you've got, if your mindset is towards creating space for other players and being that selfless, does that then compromise the sort of the mindset that you need to be a real finisher? I think it's a trade-off.
He gets into the right positions though to finish. So there's that attacking intelligence there. But it's if we could improve his decision making and his finishing, then absolutely he has a place in the team. He would be a really good asset. But we haven't seen any improvement in either of those two. In fact, I would argue he's probably regressed, particularly in decision making, which was worse last season than it was previously. If he could improve those two areas, then I believe he's got a place to.
But then, Tim, if you had a quick, strong striker with incredible stamina who creates creates chances for other players who have brilliant decision making and could finish, they wouldn't be playing in League One.
Very true. Absolutely.
Yeah, so I think where we're coming to is every player in League One, they have certain strengths and certain weaknesses, and it's whether the trade-off works. And I think we both recognise there's a trade-off. I think we probably disagree a little bit of where the trade-off lands, Peterborough, and I totally respect your point of view because you're the season ticket holder here that goes home and away. So
sorry, Gabs. I think Mothersill is probably going to be more of a key. Like I say, I think if he can stay fit, we will have a different option because Mothersill is almost the best of both worlds. He does make life difficult for defenders. Yes, he's not as fast, but there's very few cars as fast as Ricky J. Jones. So it's hard to be as quick as him. But Mothersill is quite pacey. He's tricky. He's got good agility, but he can finish and he does know where the goal is. We've just not seen that consistency with him because he's struggled with injury. I think if we can keep him fit, I think Mothersill could be the one that we look at more this season. And then in terms of what happens to Ricky, I don't know. It feels like square peg round hole a little bit with Ricky, but we'll see.
We'll see. Expectations for this season, Tim. I feel like we've had this conversation once or twice before where it's feeling a little bit apprehensive about Posh. We're sort of wondering whether some of these players are quite going to make the grade, if you like, for a top six side, and whether they're quite ready to compete. And then it sort of clicks in the season. It's Darren Ferguson, it's Peterborough in League One, and somehow he's able to put a really good side together. So with that in mind, how do you feel about the expectation for this season?
I mean, it feels like we're answering that without all the information because obviously there's still going to be, people coming into the club. But as we are right now and looking at the squads around us, particularly those that have done their transfer work early, you have to be looking at playoffs, I think, as Posh again. I think anything less than playoffs would be disappointing. I do think that we will find it harder this season, and not just because the league is harder, but because our expectations are probably a little bit higher than what they were last summer. Yeah, I think if I was to kind of, head says playoffs, heart says everything that you just mentioned there is Darren Ferguson, it's Posh, it's League One. It's so hard to predict. I think playoffs. I can't at the minute. There's too many. There's other squads around us that are better than us across 46 games. I don't think automatics is within reach. Playoffs, I'd be happy with. But last season, this time of the year, we were saying mid-table. So I think we still need to kind of be realistic. I think anything less than playoffs would disappoint the club. So that's probably where I think that's where most fan bases would put Posh. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but probably somewhere around playoffs.
So if we're looking at playoffs and we're looking at building a best 11, sort of notwithstanding depth and injuries, which is an important thing, but let's focus on best 11. I personally think there's 7 players you've got right there who are top 6 capable.
Okay.
You would probably say 6 because of the like Jones.
I think Mothersill could put us top 6, so we'll just have them interchangeable. We'll swap them 2 over.
Okay, all right, fine. Let's say 7. But there's the concerns about Edwards and Burrows possibly leaving, so they'd need to be replaced competent of the right level. And then so for the remaining sort of 4 spots, it's either your George Nevitts and your Chris Clarks make it the step up seamlessly and they're able to find the consistency to match their talent straight away, or you need really good signings like of a Peter Chioso sort of mould in the fullback areas and that sort of thing. So what do you think's needed if you're looking at big picture?
Yeah, we were never going to sign Chioso. Our fan base needs to have a bit of a reality check if they thought we were ever going to sign Chioso. Yeah, no, it's funny because he's obviously since he went to Oxford, our fan base has kind of gone into meltdown a bit. We were never going to spend that sort of money on a defender. It was just never going to happen. And that, I guess, therein maybe lies the answer to your question in terms of areas that need to be improved. Definitely right back. We need a centre back. We potentially need 2 centre backs, particularly if Edwards goes. If Burrows goes, we need a left back. So really, we just need an entire back line. Now we've got the goalkeeper sorted, but if you could bring in 4 really good quality League One defenders, we're probably not a million miles away. I mean, I personally would probably look at an attacking central midfielder, just because Joel Randall is quite hit and miss. He's been a player that's been. We've got a love-hate relationship with Joel Randall. It'd be nice to have a little bit of competition for him in terms of players that can.
For me, on Joel Randall, I have a similar philosophy with him to I do on Jones, which is where you have your big numbers players who are Poku and Mason Clark, but in order for your big numbers players to deliver, you've got to have players who create space for them. So what I think Joel Randall did really well is overload the left channel, because Harrison Burrows actually inverted quite a bit from left back. So there wasn't a huge amount of width other than Mason Clark, who liked to sort of cut inside at the later stages. But it's Randall's running that actually facilitates that. So and the way that he connects the midfield and attack. So again, I appreciate that Randall's, I don't know Randall's numbers off by heart, but I imagine they'd be on the low side. But again, I think that's partly because he's facilitating the chance creation for the good of the team. And for me, I don't think that's enough of a priority. I think you say to Randall, can you help Chris Clark become a superstar in League One? For me, that's how you should be looking at it, and I think there's much bigger areas to prioritize. So you've got to look at areas where you're signing players who really move the needle. And I think for me, Randall signing another attacking midfielder, I think would sort of dilute the budget unnecessarily, in my view.
No, I agree. And I certainly agree with you about Randall in terms of being that Ricky J. Jones type player that creates robbers. No disagreement there. There was times last season where Joe Randall was frustrating the life out of the fan base, and it would be nice if there was another player just knocking on that door. I'm not suggesting we go out and spend huge amounts of money. We don't anyway, but it would be nice to find the next superstar from the Dog and Duck like we normally do, just to kind of be knocking on the door a little bit for Joel Randall. But in terms of priorities, it's a boring answer, but it really is just that back line. That's, losing Josh Knight is huge. If we do lose Edwards, that's big. If we lose Burrows, that's big. And even if Burrows and Edwards do stay, we're going to need some sort of experience at the back. We're going to need to fill those gaps. We need somebody that can actually play right back. That back line is really where we need to be. We need to be investing, I think, this summer.
I just wanted to quickly touch on Adeji Rougeau and
Hemi,
Kamara, who you've
yep.
signed from Welling. I mean, any chance they get to feature next season? In the cups and that kind of thing. Or
I think Pemi will. He'll feature a fair bit in the league, I would imagine. Again, he's not a starter, but he'll be in and around the bench. I wouldn't be surprised at all. Again, I suppose it's just another couple of names in that hat of potential next big money moves for the club. So I see no reason why they can't develop.
Yeah, hopefully they get their moments. Just to condense everything we've talked about, Tim, what would be the big reasons to believe Peterborough can meet their ambitions this season, which would be a top 6 finish?
Because it's what Posh do, finish in the playoffs. I don't know if I can take that as an answer. Ultimately, we've still got the spine of the team that performed so well for so long last season. Yes, we've lost a couple of, or we potentially will lose even more, but we've lost a couple of big names in there. And leaders as well. Josh Knight, Johnson, Clark, Harris going a big. But that spine is still there. The young players that were performing so well last season, the likes of Poku, they're only going to get better. So you have to kind of believe in that development will continue, that their footballing ability will continue. And ultimately, as much as it hates me to say it, because it's a cliche that our chairman uses all the time, we've just got to trust in the process a little bit here. There is very much a working plan that's always more than a season ahead at Posh. So they will have planned for this season, last season, and they will know what's coming, the types of characters that they want in the building, the types of positions that they need to fill with quality. So we just have to trust that. Darren Ferguson, as in not Darren has always done us good. I've no reason to doubt his ability to do so again. So, yeah, it's really kind of just that living up to expectations, and hopefully we'll see some exciting football again. Because last season, for parts, we were blessed with some of the best football that I've ever seen at the club. And bearing in mind we're known as this attacking, expansive outfit, I feel like that's a big compliment for that group we had last season. So I'm excited to see those kind of players continue their development, and hopefully we'll see Malik Mothersill tearing up as League One's top scorer.
Right, so what would be your reasons for doubt then? Is it that the players who might not quite be ready, especially if a couple of those big hitters leave?
I think what cost us last year was our lack of depth, and I fear that we'll probably have the same issue going into this season. We had a couple of injuries around January. We didn't use the January transfer window to strengthen those positions. I understand Peter Koso, etc., got recalled and so on and so forth, but we didn't replace them. And I think that lack of depth could cost us again. Like you said earlier, we've got maybe 15 players that you would say, yeah, good players, definitely ready for this level. But beyond that, we're relying on the youngsters. And, I understand why, and it works, and there's budget constraints and so on and so forth. But depth is probably the issue. Ask me again in 2 weeks, it may be slightly different. But as we are at the moment, I'm worried about that back line, and I'm worried about lack of depth in those key positions.
Yeah, of course. Plenty of time for that to change as well, of course. But understandable for where we are right now. Too early for a prediction with that in mind, but I'd like to get a number between 1 and 10 for your level of optimism for next season, Tim.
With 10 being super optimistic.
Yeah.
At the minute, I would probably say 7, just because for us it's a copy and paste of every summer previous in terms of losing big names and hoping that these youngsters that we're pulling out from non-league step up to the mark. So I would say 7. I'm feeling a little bit flat about it all, if I'm honest. I don't know if it's because the Euros are on, and let's be honest, that's getting us all down with that at the moment. So I'm not sure if it's that. Maybe I just needed the break from football. I'm just a bit flat with it all. I don't know. I'm not overly excited for it. I mean, I'm excited for it to come back.
I think once a couple of the signings roll in, you'll start to get a bit more.
The fixtures coming out today helped. That was nice, looking at the away days and starting to plan certain dates and stuff like that. So that was good. But yeah, just a bit flat. I would say probably a 7. I'm confident that we'll be there or thereabouts. But I'm always slightly cautious because you just never know with this team.
Never know. A reason to be excited as well. So we'll have to wait and see. Listen, Tim, thank you so much for your insight. I really appreciate your time joining me this afternoon. Thanks for joining me from the Yellow Box podcast. Make sure everyone goes subscribe. You can subscribe to EFL Debate on YouTube and on Spotify. Get your comments in below. Let me know how you think Peterborough are going to get on in League One next season. And that's about it. Thanks to you for watching at home, and we'll see you again very soon.